A possible contract extension for Elly De La Cruz has nothing to do with the Cincinnati Reds' willingness to spend or his agent, Scott Boras. We'll tell you why on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. He's Jeff Carr. We love baseball. We love these Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken our love for the game. We have taken our love for this team, and we have turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's podcast, we are going to react to a column that's floating around out there from Reds beat writer and local Debbie Downer, Gordon Whitmire, who basically paints a bleak picture of the Reds' ability to sign Elly De La Cruz. We're going to tell you why you might not want to pay a whole lot of attention to what old Gordo had to say about that. We're also going to take a look at Hunter Greene. We didn't get to talk about him yesterday. There was just too much to cover. We've got some time today, and we're going to talk about Hunter Greene because he has been lights out several starts in a row. His recent performances have been amazing, and we are going to break them down. Emilio Pagan is going to enter the chat because he said the things that we have been thinking and feeling. He just put them all out there, and I applaud him for it. We're going to tell you what he said a little later in the show. Before I get to that, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's episode. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use the code all lowercase lockedonmlb for a first deposit match of up to $100. All right, Jeff, let's talk about this extending Elly De La Cruz. And listen, I want to set this up like this, Jeff, because I feel like if this team had not just endured the most horrific road trip in recent memory, this wouldn't be out there right now. If the Reds were winning and there were good vibes floating around, we'd be hearing from Charlie Goldsmith instead of Gordon Whitmire. And it's just the way that it is. Times are good. Charlie writes happy stuff. And then when they need a hit piece, they go to Gordon. That's just the way I feel about it. So I feel like he was stirring the pot a little bit here with this thing. What's your instant gut reaction to the Reds can't sign Elly?
I definitely think you're right. I think it's like good cop, bad cop routine or something like that with the Reds beat these days. Honestly, I don't necessarily know that I disagree with him, but I don't necessarily think that it's one of those things where the Reds are cheaping out or Scott Boras is some evil man that only usurps as much cash as he possibly can and he's some sort of Emperor Palpatine or something in Major League Baseball. It's not that at all. This idea of extending Elly De La Cruz is something that we, the fans, have kind of conjured up based on recent extensions to guys like Ronald Acuna and guys like Ozzie Albies, and we see any number of extensions for guys like Jackson Churio, who the Brewers gave extension to without even calling him up yet. And I mean, now he's in the major leagues, but they gave him an extension before they called him up. It's things like that we look and we say, well, the Reds should do that with Elly De La Cruz. There are multiple reasons why they won't. And there's multiple reasons why I'm not that worried about it right now. But I want to get into that in a little bit. Because the first and foremost reason why the Reds are not going to get an extension done, at least for the foreseeable future, with Elly De La Cruz is because baseball as we know it is very likely to change in 2026. The collective bargaining agreement is up at the end of that year. And with that, and with the way that television rights are being handled right now, with the rumors that Rob Manfred is trying to centralize all of that and create like a league based sort of streaming rights deal or something like that, that is going to change the face of the financials in Major League Baseball, because there are plenty of teams like the Reds that are under the Bally Sports umbrella and things like that, that we are pining for some sort of league centralized streaming deal so that there's no blackouts. We can watch our team whenever we want and all this other stuff. There are teams like the Dodgers and the Red Sox and the Yankees that have their own channels that make bukus of bucks every single year with those channels that want nothing to do with a centralized platform. I say all that to say this, Steve, a fight is coming, and it is something that will completely resurface baseball. And because of that, the Reds shouldn't even approach this, and neither will Scott Boras.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It takes two to make a deal, right? And Elly De La Cruz has representation, and you can kind of read between the lines on some recent Scott Boras quotes to know just where exactly Scott Boras stands on this and what he's telling Elly. I'll quote Scott Boras here. Quote, "Give me the best extension you know of. Where's one that's worked out great for the player? A great young player. And he signed an extension and it worked out great for him. How did Mike Trout's go? Mike Trout gave up age 26, 27, and 28 seasons, basically. Close quote is what Scott Boras had to say. You read that, and Scott Boras is not in favor of a young player signing an extension, any young player signing an extension, and especially not one that is on the cusp of becoming not only the face of the franchise, probably is already the face of the franchise. He's on the cusp of becoming the face of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, there's multiple, national pundits and writers and things like this that watch Elly De La Cruz and they're like, oh my gosh, this guy could be special, like best player on the planet type special. And we've been trying to tell you this for a couple of years now, and everybody wants to talk about strikeout percentage, and I get it, it's higher than you would expect, but even with that, he's doing things that nobody else can think of right now. So I'm not that conversation is moot. You can talk about strikeout percentage all you want. I'm going to tell you about everything else that Elly De La Cruz does on the field, because it's a lot of things. And there's a reason that this is even a subject. But even beyond the things that the Reds nor Scott Boras really control in the whole fight that could be coming here in a couple of years for the collective bargaining agreement, there's another philosophy, and Scott Boras made this about the league, but this is really something that the Reds are trying to harp on. We've talked about this in the offseason. The Reds are trying the Rays model, and maybe not to the extreme that the Tampa Bay Rays have taken it, but the idea is super long-term contracts don't help out teams. And I love Joseph Daniel Votto, but they are going to use that as an example for a long time, where the final 3 to 4 years of that deal were just the tax of making that contract extension early on. And while he was a great player for most of his contract, there is still going to be a period of time during a 10-year deal that you just aren't that great. And so what does that look like for a team like the Reds that is constantly going to call themselves small market, regardless of what we feel about that? They are going to say that. And as much as we might disagree with it, we are not the ones that control them. So this is how they're going to operate. They are going to not give those 10-year deals. And if there's anybody that's going to garner a 10-year deal, it's going to be Elly De La Cruz.
Maybe even more. He's gonna make a number that I can't imagine the Cincinnati Reds being willing to sign. And it's gonna be a sad day, but there will come a day where they probably have to trade him. But that day is not today. And I think I'm with you. Yes. When we're talking about extensions and we're talking about what's going on, do we really have to worry about that right now? I mean, we know now that Elly's representation is not going to put a deal together for him to sign. We know it. Scott Boras has basically told us that. There's no reason to really focus on this. Can we just enjoy Elly while we've got Elly? I think that's the answer. Let's just enjoy Elly while we've got him, and we'll revisit this when we know what the financial landscape of baseball looks like in the next collective bargaining agreement. Because if you look at Elly's team control and you look at when the collective bargaining agreement expires, will be in the new financial plan before the Reds have to pull the trigger on making a trade or signing an extension. So the timing is fine. So let's not worry about it. Let's just enjoy having one of the most game disrupting players that this game has seen in decades. I love it.
Yeah, we did this exercise over the off season when we talked about Joseph Daniel Votto. Like, the idea of a player who plays for one team for their entire career is dead. That idea is not real. And quite frankly, I would venture to say that the team that, Elly could go to after his rookie year is done is not the team that he will finish with. Like, the game of baseball, both players and teams have gone to a model where it doesn't make sense to hold on to a guy for his entire career, both financially and for other reasons as well. So because of that, I'm not going to worry about 10 years down the road right now. I'm going to worry about the 4 stolen bases he had against Los Angeles. I'm going to worry about the cycle that he hit as a freaking rookie. I'm going to worry about the fun that he brings to the ballpark every single day. And I'm not going to worry myself with what the future holds in 6 years or, how much is he going to make? I'm not worried about all of that. And I'm certainly not going to press myself with the little minutia of whether or not he is going to sign a contract extension here, because that's going to take care of itself one way or the other.
Absolutely. And as long as he's here, I'm going to enjoy it, and the rest will take care of itself.
So, with that being said, let's kind of focus back in on our team right now, because there's a lot of fun stuff that's going on amongst the losing, namely with the Reds' ace to be, because Hunter Greene is taking that step. We'll tell you why coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Are you struggling to close deals? I get it. Business to business selling is tougher than ever. And that's why I want to tell you about that LinkedIn Sales Navigator, because LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performances. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date, first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter the most. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/locked on. That's linkedin.com/LOCKEDON for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/locked on and get started. You've got to try out Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed just for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories in all of sports. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And speaking of every day, shout out to our everydayers out there. If you're not an everydayer, make sure you become one by clicking the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app and right here on YouTube. And for our everydayers, coming up on the next Locked On Reds podcast, Nick Martinez is proving why he was such a valuable offseason addition, but should the Reds just run him out as a starter in Nick Lodolo's absence, or should they do something else? Because I have a thought about what that something else should be. But Steve, let's look at Hunter Greene, because lost in the fact that the Reds lost was the fact that Hunter Greene pitched phenomenally well yet again. He is on quite a streak, and he is starting to look like that ace, the wonderful A word that we love to use with potential pitchers that are really good, and we maybe attributed it to him a little bit too quickly, but maybe now he's starting to fit into that.
Yeah, I think so. He turned a corner on April 22nd. In a game against the Philadelphia Phillies, he threw 7 innings. He allowed 4 runs on 7 hits. Since then, he's not given up more than 3 runs. He's thrown 7 innings a couple more times. He's given up in those starts since then no runs in his start against Texas. I'm taking credit for that because I was there. He gave up no runs against Baltimore. He gave up 3 against Arizona and then started again against Arizona, giving up 2, and then 2 against the Dodgers. Listen, those Arizona lineups, that Baltimore lineup, that Dodgers lineup, all of those lineups are beasts. Those teams are good. And Hunter Greene did a thing. I think we're finally seeing the evolution of Hunter Greene, the thrower, into Hunter Greene, the pitcher. And then that gets you to Hunter Greene, the ace, as you say.
Yes, and the quality of opponents cannot be understated here. I mean, none of these teams are slouches. I get it. Arizona's under 500 right now. Arizona's going to be in the playoff discussion all season long. That's a good ball club. And Texas and Philadelphia and Los Angeles, like, in Baltimore, I mean, he pitched phenomenally well against Baltimore. He had the 4 walks and stuff, but these last 2 starts, man, you look at the Dodgers, 2 walks. Arizona, 1 walk. Those are numbers to my ears. Like, the strikeouts are nice and all, the 8 strikeouts against the Dodgers, but I mean, we're talking about a guy that is evolving before our very eyes. And I don't necessarily know that it is so much about what his third pitch is. It's just being confident in his first 2 pitches and knowing that he can place them where he needs to be. He doesn't have to overthrow them. He doesn't have to become that slingshot type pitcher that we see him do sometimes, where it's like, okay, I got a really rare back and throw this thing. He knows if he just locates it, he's a dangerous pitcher.
One of the things that Jeff Brantley said on the broadcast, I think in that start against the Dodgers, was that one of the things Hunter has going for him right now is he's finally got all of his pitches coming out of the same arm slot. Everything looks the same as it's coming towards the hitter. And that makes a huge difference in the results that we've seen. You're absolutely right about his walk rate right now. 2 walks against that Dodgers lineup, 1 walk against Arizona, the second start. He's done really, really well.
I think this is interesting too, because I was trying to break down some of the numbers and see, like, let's really dive into how impressive he has been. We always talk, obviously, about the lineup when it comes to hitting with runners in scoring position. But how do pitchers limit that damage? Hunter Greene has been phenomenal at it. With runners in scoring position so far this season, he has faced this. It's been about 60 different plate appearances where runners have been in scoring position against him. Opposing hitters have a 178 batting average in those situations. He has 15 strikeouts compared to just 7 walks. And mind you, we're talking about Hunter Greene, so everybody knows the big bomb, right? The homer, that's the problem. 1 home run in 60 plate appearances with runners in scoring position. When the pressure is on the hardest, he stands up the tallest.
Now, one of the things we should probably talk about is, well, if he's pitching so well, why aren't the Reds winning? Because they're not scoring runs. That's why the Reds aren't winning. They have not given Hunter Greene any real measurable run support through this entire stretch where he's been pitching so well. And then when he does leave the game with a lead, your guy, Alexis Diaz, no, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that to you again. But the back end of the bullpen has been terrible at not protecting leads or holding tie games. And, Hunter's a victim of that as well. All of these starting pitchers are a victim of that. The starting pitching, even outside of Hunter, I think success breeds success. And we're seeing it with all the starting pitching. The starting pitching has been the one spot on this team you can look at pretty much every day and be like, hey, all right, something to be excited about, something to point at, to say that it's strong. And Hunter is leading that group right now. I really think we can go back to Frankie Montas starting opening day as being a bit of a nudge, a little push from the Reds to kind of get him going a little bit. And I think it's working.
Well, and we talked about that too, right? Like, if that wasn't the catalyst for Hunter Greene to be like, man, I really need to pick this thing up, then he doesn't deserve to be called an ace. And he is absolutely rising to that challenge. And I find this interesting, see, because you mentioned the run support. And I was trying to think, I'm like, man, like, what does this look like for him? Consider for a moment Aaron Hooray. We love Aaron Hooray, you and I. And in fact, most Reds fans do. They remember him very fondly. They remember him to be a very good pitcher for the Reds, especially for a couple of years in 2006 and 2007 when he was just untouchable. Hard, I mean, you almost couldn't. you almost could not get a hit off of him. But we always thought that Aaron Harang never got the support that he was deserving of. That they needed to score more runs. But he was a guy that whenever he was on the mound, they'd score 2 or 3 runs against him. That wasn't the case. In fact, in 2006 and 2007, the Reds scored on average 5 runs for him. The Reds have scored 3.1 runs per game for Hunter Greene so far this season. 3. So you basically have to be perfect because a quality start is 6 innings pitched and 3 runs allowed. So if you're pitching a quality start and you're Hunter Greene, you're leaving with a no decision. So at this point right now, if someone wants to stand on top of a table and fight us about win-loss record, which, by the way, it's a terrible fight. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's why. They're just not scoring runs for him.
This is what I know, Jeff. Hunter Greene has answered a call. Hunter Greene has dug deep. Hunter Greene is evolving. Hunter Greene is fast becoming an ace. And if he keeps pitching like this, we may be talking about all-star Hunter Greene by the time we get into July. All right. Hunter Greene hasn't said a lot of the things that we have been feeling, but you know who did? Emilio Pagan. He spoke truth earlier this week, Jeff, about how the team has performed. He spoke truth about where they need to go from here. And we're going to tell you what he said coming up next. Baseball season is moving right along, and you can make some cash on Elly De La Cruz's performances over on PrizePicks. Whether it's stolen bases, home runs, or hits, just take your pick of more or less on what Elly is going to do and add them to your PrizePicks entry today. With how well Elly plays baseball, you can turn $10 into $100 with just a few taps. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit the entry in about 60 seconds. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types that you can choose from over at PrizePicks. It's what makes them America's #1 fantasy sports app. So get in on the action with PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for a $100 match, up to $100 match on your first deposit. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. You can catch every pitch of the Reds' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Reds. Also, if you haven't done so, check out CincinnatiRedsTalk.com to get Reds coverage in written form. I'm going to be contributing over there. Jeff's writing over there. James Rapine's over there. Audie Elmore shows up from time to time. Great group of very knowledgeable people writing about your Cincinnati Reds. All right, Jeff, Emilio Pagan said some things. And first off, just let me say how surprised I am that this is coming from newly acquired relief pitcher Emilio Pagan, like that he's the guy that gave life to this. But I commend him for it because he definitely said what we've been thinking. I mean, it's like he was reading our text from over the weekend, basically. He finally gave life to how we're feeling.
I wanted so badly for there to be a clip of this because we would have played it. It would have been fantastic. But Emilio Pagan, and I was not clapping like some ironic statement that you were making or something about this. I was clapping because of what he said was phenomenal. And if you did not see the comment, it was in Mark Sheldon's article on MLB or on Reds.com after the Reds lost to the Dodgers. He had a lot to say. I kind of want to break this down. There's a couple of sections here, but let's start with this first one. Emilio Pagan said this: "It sucks. We understand that this is unacceptable as far as results, winning and losing. We've just got to keep playing. You don't want to try and do too much. You don't want to start pressing or whatever. We understand we have to start stringing together some wins. It's not fun coming to the field, losing series after series after series." And yes, he said series 3 times. We're too good of a team to be doing this. This is exactly what you and I have been saying. And there are plenty of folks that have now written off the Reds and said that this team is bad, this team won't go anywhere. I did a poll on both our Locked On Reds Discord page, which, by the way, you should check that out. Link in the description down below. And a poll on Twitter, Will the Reds end the 2024 season with a winning record? The majority in both cases say no. I still believe they will. And it's not because I'm a delusional optimist, it's because I see the talent on this team, and I think that they can right the ship to the point that whenever people start to return, like Marte, McLean, whenever you get Friedel back, whenever you get CES back, then they're going to go on that run that we know that they have in them. And that is what Emilio Pagan is saying here. He is not saying the whole, well, we're close. You know, we're going out there and we're competing every day and we're close, that David Bell has been saying. He is saying what we all know this team is feeling right now.
You know, I leaned into this a little bit yesterday when we talked about what this team has done and how really disappointed I was in how the back end of the bullpen has performed, because that 1-11 record in 1-run games means something right now. You and I talk about this all the time. Every team in baseball is going to win 54 games. They're going to lose 54 games. And then there's 54 games that decide the season. The Reds are losing a lot of games right now, but they have not played their first 54 games yet.
Right.
If the back end of the bullpen had been doing its job right now, we would be talking about a team that was 3 games over 500. That's a big deal right now, because again, they're doing it without their first baseman, their second baseman, their third baseman, their center fielder, and they're still getting it done by and large. There's just been some disappointment. So all that being said, what Emilio says here about this team is better. They are. This team can still be good. They can be. This team needs to play with some urgency and string some wins together. Yes, that's true also, because they've about used up those first 54 games.
No, and I 100% agree with you. 1-run losses definitely fit square into that. But I was also looking at this. At no point last season were the Reds 9 games under 500. So I think there's definitely a lot of consternation to be had. And Emilio Pagan kind of addressed that a little bit in this other section of his quote, because I feel like this is still very relevant. And he says something in here that you and I both loved whenever we first saw these quotes. Emilio Pagan said this: "We'll be able to make up ground. There's some guys on this team that have been on teams where you're supposed to be good. You say, it'll come, it'll come, it'll come, and then it never comes. We do need to play with some urgency for sure, but we're not panicking by any means. We know what we're capable of, and we'll go on our run. Hopefully soon, but it will come." And that urgency needs to start tonight, to be quite frank with you. Like, we're looking at a team that, yes, much of the lineup is gone. And we're looking at a team that the bullpen has been very ineffective so far. You start turning that around right now, and you start looking at what this team could still accomplish. But if you continue this stretch, if 9 games turns into 10, turns into 12, turns into 15 games under 500, then whenever you do go on that run, it's going to be just to get back to 500 and to get back to a level where you feel like this season isn't so much a failure. But make no mistake about it, you won't be competing for the playoffs if you continue to dig this hole.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't like to label series in May as must win, but after the way this road trip went, they need to take the series from the Padres. They need to win 2 of 3 against the Padres and start a winning series momentum again. Dodgers come to town again. I don't know that it's realistic for me to ask them to take that series, but yet they really should have had a split out in Los Angeles. So they could steal 2 of 3 if the bullpen does its job based on what we've seen from everybody else on this team. If you can put together a couple series wins, that gets us to the end of May and the start of division play, where this schedule gets much, much easier.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the point where the run becomes important, because when you start to play your divisional opponents, not just going 2 out of 3, but rattling off a 4-game win streak, a 5-game win streak, a 6-game win streak is going to mean so much, not only for their individual team record, but also for those standings, because every single win against the Cardinals, against the Pirates, against the Cubs, because right now the Reds are looking up at all 4 of them, and the Brewers as well. Every single win against them is a game in the standings. So that's going to be the point where this team really needs to be cooking with gas, but you put the gas on the grill in these next 6 games, and they really got to do that. I really hope that David Bell comes out here and we see a different lineup. We don't see Mike Ford in the 3 spot. Don't know that I want to see Will Benson in the leadoff spot. Like, there's got to be some changes there with that. But we also need to see how the bullpen gets reshuffled a little bit, because I don't necessarily know that you can just keep running that bullpen strategy out there day in and day out and expecting what we have seen so far to just flip on its head.
Right. I mean, we talked about this. What should they do? Should we be talking about Tony Santillan? Should we be talking about closer by committee? I think all of those things should be on the table. They can't wait. They can't wait until July and say, we're going to wait till everybody's healthy, which there's things they've said in the past.
Yeah.
I think it'll be different this year, but now is the time, in fact, to start taking action. And before we get out of here, Jeff, while we're about to wrap it up, I just want to make a mention, just because I'm thinking about it. And we were talking about getting ready to get back into some division play at the end of the month. The St. Louis Cardinals come to town. Oof. Did you see these ridiculous City Connect jerseys that St. Louis rolled out yesterday?
You mean they're normal jerseys that they just changed the hat?
and now there was one other change, because now across the front with the birds and the bat, it says the Lou, which makes me think somebody needs to tinkle, because right? The Lou. How did this get through anybody that has any education in marketing? How was that the best option that they could come up with?
There's a bunch of friends across the pond that are just going like, they did what now? The what to their jerseys? Yeah. They put the Lou.
We need to get Peter on here from the Marlins,
from Locked On Marlins.
And Locked On Marlins, and have him run us through the UK's reaction to the Lou.
Oh my goodness. What and I was actually texting with our Locked On Cardinals host JD about this. I'm just like, dude, like, I feel like I'm looking at the Dodgers City Connect uniforms, which if you haven't seen those, they're still the same blue uniforms. They just have different wording on the front. And I think it says Los Dodgers. But it's just like, look, like, you had a chance to do something different. And JD was like, man, they had like this navy blue concept that they could have tapped into. Maybe, and a lot of Cardinals fans were expecting like, them to use the gateway arch as something that they could have on the all of those sound like better ideas than what they did, because what they did was copy paste their old uniforms and then just take and say, well, let's write something else on the front. And I think at the very last minute, they're like, crap, we still haven't written anything. What do we write? The Lou! And that's what they ended up with, because it looks
nothing makes me happier, Jeff. Nothing makes me happier than when the Cardinals and their fans get exactly what they deserve. And on that note, we're going to call it a day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. Everydayers, Jeff's got you tomorrow, and he's going to be talking about Nick Martinez and how he's proving himself very, very valuable. Jeff, tell them what they can expect from us the rest of this season as we watch these Reds dig out of this hole.
They are going to dig. If we can hand them the shovel, we are going to hand them the shovel to help them dig themselves out of this thing, because we're going to be with them, whether they win, whether they lose, whatever kind of trade rumors come down. And by the way, the Reds get the number 2 overall pick in the MLB draft this year. Don't know if you know that or not. And we're going to be all over that, because we are Locked On Reds every single day.
The Lou.
Speaking of which, I got to go hit the Lou. Hang on.